What's going on, summoners? Welcome back to another Wild Rift video. My name is Kangas, and today I'm going over 6 champions that are just OP and high elo on patch 2.0a. These champions aren't bad when they're played by the average player, but they perform far better when played by extremely skilled players who can really push their kits to the limit. So without further ado, let's get straight into it.
First up, we have AKALI. She's been terrorizing all elos for a while now, and she's pretty busted no matter who's playing her, but she's especially broken in the hands of top tier players. High-ranked players usually have a far better grasp of how their champion functions inside of a game and often have great control over their champions, which allows them to push the limits of what they're capable of. One of the first things that makes AKALI better in high elo is that she has a somewhat poor laning phase. Inexperienced players are not particularly good at minimizing loss, and while they might be capable of winning lanes pretty hard, when they're in the back foot, it's a different story. AKALI masters, meanwhile, navigate the lane phase extremely smart, farming up a storm while losing as little HP as they can. AKALI might seem like a champion that always wants to be fighting, but if you can get to your gunblade spike without throwing the game, you're pretty much sure to win. A lot of champions on the list require a certain type of finesse and smoothness to your gameplay. AKALI's passive, Assassin's Mark, rewards good mechanics by allowing players with fluid and intelligent movement to pump out considerably more damage in their combos than players that don't pay attention to that stuff. Shuriken Flip and Perfect Execution are also pretty hard to use well, and combining all of AKALI's abilities to make for fluid and quick combos takes a large amount of practice. Assassins are often easy to play outside of high elo because the level of player awareness is often lower and reactions will be slower. In high elo though, the response to an AKALI or Fizz going for an assassination is often team-wide, and because of this, it's very hard to find good engages. However, the best players on the Wild Rift adapt to this and become creative players who find new solutions every game to secure kills. Being able to adapt and change your game plan in response to what's happening isn't something that players are born with. That one is a trained skill. Assassin players reward this heavily, and high elo players are often pretty good at it. AKALI is extremely fun and super rewarding. You can constantly improve on a micro level, and the strongest AKALI players make jaw-dropping plays every single game. AKALI is OP in all games, but certainly the most OP in high elo. Before we keep going, I just gotta say, come join our Wild Rift Discord in the description down below. You can hang out, make new friends, and find more people to play games with. We got a lot of fun in there, so come join in. Next up, we have CAMILLE. She's a solid bruiser who finds her home in the Baron lane, but it's likely that you really don't think she's that OP. Compared to picks like Olaf and Darius, who have mountains of damage in the early game and are just pretty straightforward to pilot, putting time into CAMILLE might feel like a waste. But when mastered, CAMILLE is one of the best Baron laners to carry with, and when you learn to successfully navigate her lane phase, she's pretty OP. CAMILLE doesn't really straight up win if you head ram into most champions until later on in the game. Once you complete Trinity Force, Ravenous Hydra, and Sterix Gauge, you're probably one of the strongest champions on the Rift. Admittedly, that takes a long time, so play CAMILLE, you have to learn to get through the early game. CAMILLE's 2 main tools for trading in the early game are Tactical Sweep and her passive Adaptive Defenses. Both of these allow you to get potentially unanswered trades against your laner. High elo players are great at playing around their cooldowns, and won't put themselves in positions to be punished when they're not available. Using Tactical Sweep to collect minions and harass from range at the same time, and only taking trades when Adaptive Defense is available, makes CAMILLE into a relatively formidable laner. If you have to commit to a skirmish and you haven't already achieved a health lead over your laner, you'll probably lose, so it's important for CAMILLE to actively seek good trades. CAMILLE also requires a lot of finesse to pilot well. She relies on consistent and quick auto attack, so good stutter stepping and spacing after every single auto is vital. Movement is one of the hardest things to master on the Rift, and optimal movement while weaving in countless auto attacks is extremely difficult. CAMILLE's ultimate Hextech Ultimatum briefly renders her untargetable while she's leaping to the enemy champion. This provides another opportunity for skill expression, and can be used to dodge critical abilities like Alistair Headbutt or even Malphite's Unstoppable Force. Can't stop it, just jump over it. What you'll notice is that high elo CAMILLE players won't just instantly cast this ability. They'll hold it until the best moment arrives, where they can use it for either lockdown or to dodge damage or CC. When played by a skilled laner with strong mechanics, CAMILLE can look quite OP. The level of fundamentals required to play her well do take a lot of time to build, and finding success on CAMILLE requires heavy investment. But if you have the time, I definitely recommend CAMILLE, as she is extremely satisfying and can be pretty OP when played optimally. Before we finish the video, we got a question of the day. What champion frustrates you the most? I think we all hate playing against Yasuo and his annoying wind wall, but let us know the other ones in the comments below. Or just spam Yasuo, that makes sense too. ORIANNA is another one of those champions that is always somewhat strong, but never really seems oppressive or broken. But in high elo games, if Orianna is allowed to play her style of League of Legends, she is beyond obnoxious to play against. The main fault that plagues most Orianna mains is that they play way too passive during the laning phase. Orianna's early skirmishing compared to champions like Zed or Fizz isn't as great, but she does make up for it with the potential for harass and abuse during the lane itself. The thing is, Orianna's burst isn't great in the early game, and she's also really easy to kill. Orianna can circumvent this with smart movement to keep herself out of enemy range while poking at her maximum range. Orianna can repeatedly use command attack to chip away at the enemy's health bar, punishing them for every CC that they step up for. If left alone, skilled Orianna players can often generate huge individual leads just through abuse of her powerful harass and wave manipulation. Movement and wave manipulation are core to Orianna's laning phase, and while wave manipulation isn't that useful later on, the movement stays incredibly relevant. Orianna has an easy time keeping enemy champions out of range, and a good Ori player will be making sure that you feel the pain before you even get an opportunity to hit her. Most players will try to hard engage on her, and while that is potentially the correct move, you have to be very careful. If your engage is too brazen or easy to read, Orianna can line up a massive shockwave and just straight up carry the game on her own. Wombo combos with Shockwave are the clips that make the highlights, but most of the time, they're pretty easy to set up. Skilled Orianna players make it impossible to engage without dying, and pump out crazy damage during teamfights. You're not really going to see intelligent recalls or minion denial in a montage, but that's really what makes her oppressive to play against in the hands of a skilled player. Our next champ that's OP in high elo is Kai'Sa. She's pretty strong across all levels of play at the moment, but she's much better when her kit is pushed to its maximum potential. She's known for being extremely slippery with her invisibility and for bursting down carries straight up on her own. But when piloted well, her teamfighting becomes really crazy. Kai'Sa's lane phase is pretty decent. She can trade well with passive procs and Icathian Rain, and if she happens to land a Void Seeker, a good trade is basically guaranteed. She doesn't have the same level of poke as laners like Ashe and Misfortune, but she makes up for it with the all-in threat and personal utility later on. The main difference between a new Kai'Sa and a skilled Kai'Sa is how they use their ultimate, Killer Instinct. Kai'Sa's ult can be used in so many different ways, and one that is often underutilized by players yet to master her is the defensive ult. When dealing with enemy divers, Kai'Sa can use her ultimate to dodge crucial abilities and get the shield to survive any incoming damage. Champions like Zed and AKALI really rely on landing their abilities to do meaningful damage, so if you can dodge one of them, their threat is greatly reduced. Offensive Kai'Sa ults are where the real difference is. Newer Kai'Sa players we see just take any opportunity that they see, just dive in and try and go for an outplay. Void Seeker landing on carries can often bait them in, just to be promptly exhausted and killed. Similarly, when something like Unstoppable Force is used, they may also dash in immediately and attempt to kill the enemy carries. This is not always the correct play, and one CC ability or exhaust can really ruin your entire team fight. Patience is a virtue with Kai'Sa, and masterful Kai'Sa players will constantly be tracking enemy cooldowns and lurking, DPSing the frontline while they wait for that perfect opportunity to strike. Kai'Sa's limits are hard to identify, but once you get good at knowing how far you can push it, she can be really oppressive in teamfights and easily carry games. The next champion we have for you guys is GRAGAS. GRAGAS has a really great kit, and while his numbers being somewhat undertuned prevent him from being OP across all elos, the potential of explosive cast will always keep him relevant in the higher ones. GRAGAS can turn into a one-shot machine with an undodgeable ultimate that deals hundreds of damage if he gets ahead. But what makes him powerful is that he doesn't need to deal damage to still have immense utility. A powerful explosive cast is possibly the most powerful ultimate in the game, and learning to time and aim these well is what separates the average GRAGAS player from the greats. There's two main ways to use Gragas' ult. You can place it in the middle of their team, separating the backline from the frontline and giving you time to kill the frontline while the backline is disrupted. This is good when your team is ahead and you can just melt the enemy frontliners in the time that explosive cast buys you. And this can also single-handedly win teamfights, and is a very underrated use of the ult. The other great use of Gragas' ultimate ability is to throw it behind enemy carries to knock them into your team. This is obviously great, but the range of the cast makes it quite difficult. Skilled Gragas players will bide their time, waiting until the enemy carries have committed to dealing damage to bring them closer with the cask. While this may seem simple at first, precise placement of the ultimate is extremely important. A few micro Teemos to the left or right can completely alter the angle that the enemies are launched at, and getting the desired effect out of Gragas' ult every time is very difficult. In high elo, Gragas players are precise and patient and will bide their time until they see an opportunity for a game-winning cask. Recognizing the opportunities and having the micro to make them occur is very difficult, but also extremely rewarding. Gragas is a decent pick in all elos, but definitely can trend towards OP and high elo if the player can land some standout casks. And the last champion on our list today is JANNA. JANNA's baseline effectiveness is pretty high since there's an immense amount of power in her slow, shield, and ultimate healing. They're all relatively easy to use and can get used well in all elos. But you can get endlessly creative with JANNA's Tornado, and good timing on Monsoon can turn it from a good ability into a literal game changer. Something to note about enchanters is that lower level players will tend to play extremely passively and even behind their carries. Optimal JANNA play is actually very aggressive, and you should be looking to poke the enemy lane down while denying their engages with your shield and tornado. This is a fine line to tread, and any small mistake can often just result in death. But JANNA does have the tools to be safe, so in high elos her laning phase is often far better as players push her to the limit. Monsoon is great for resetting a fight and healing up your team, but you'll often find excellent JANNA players holding it to disrupt crucial cooldowns. Things like Alistar Headbutt, CAMILLE Hookshot, and any of Lee Sin's dashes can be interrupted with Monsoon, and often they will completely ruin a teamfight for whoever gets interrupted. JANNA can also do similar things with her Tornado, however it's far more difficult and requires presence of mind and foresight to set up. You can always cast small tornadoes just for the interrupt, but if you can set up a large tornado to zone the enemy team, or even crowd control them as well while you still interrupt the dash, you're getting crazy value out of one ability. JANNA may be simple to play, but you can find endless depth in a few of her abilities, and there's always room to improve and utilize her kit for new things in game. Timing her skills well can be incredibly hard, and having the reactions and mechanics to pull them off consistently is what makes her far better in high elo.
And that wraps up our 6 OP picks in high elo for 2.0A. Hopefully you got some extra perspective into what exactly makes a champion better in high elo. And hey, if you just want to find some really rewarding champions to master, the ones in this video are a great place to start. Thanks for watching, everybody. Be sure to answer a question of the day in the comments down below. Like the video, sub to the channel, and as always, best of luck on the Rift, stay hydrated, and I'll see you in the next one.